The planet Valanthos had been beautiful once. The old story spoke of crystal towers that sang when the wind passed through them. They spoke of forests that glowed with soft blue light at night. They spoke of a proud people with silver skin and violet eyes who had built a civilization of art and science and wonder. That was 30 years ago, before the dominion of Keth came. Now the crystal towers were dark. The Keth had silenced them because they found the singing annoying. The glowing forests had been cut down to make room for mining operations. The proud Valanthian people walked with their heads bowed, afraid to meet the eyes of their conquerors. Princess Elindra Velsora remembered the old days. She had been just a child when the Keth warships filled the sky. She remembered her father, the king, standing on the palace balcony and telling his people to stay calm. She remembered the sound of plasma fire. She remembered her mother pushing her into a hidden passage as soldiers broke down the doors. Her parents had died that day. So had her brothers and sisters. Elindra alone survived, hidden by loyal servants who pretended she was just another orphan. For 20 years, she had lived in the shadows of her own world. She had watched her people break under the weight of occupation. She had seen them forget what they once were. But Elindra had not forgotten, and she was not alone. In the basement of an old temple, far from the eyes of Keth patrols, she met with others who remembered, farmers and teachers, former soldiers and young students. They called themselves the Remembrance, and they worked quietly to keep hope alive. Tonight, 12 of them sat in a circle around a flickering light. Elindra stood before them, her silver skin pale in the dim glow. "The weapons shipment arrives tomorrow," she said. "If we can intercept it, we will have enough to arm 300 fighters." An old man named Torvus shook his head. "The Keth patrols have doubled this week. Someone is talking." "Then we move faster," Elindra replied. "We cannot wait for perfect conditions. Perfect conditions will never come." Before anyone could respond, the door exploded inward. Keth soldiers poured into the room, their black armor gleaming, their weapons raised. Elindra reached for her knife, but there were too many. She watched in horror as her friends were cut down around her. Torvus fell first, then young Mira, who had only joined them last month. The screams lasted only seconds. When it was over, Elindra stood alone among the bodies. 5 Keth soldiers surrounded her, and behind them walked a figure she knew well. Overlord Zeth-Kar was tall, even for a Keth. His gray skin was marked with the ritual scars of his rank. His eyes were black and cold like the space between stars. He ruled Valanthos with an iron grip, and he had been hunting the resistance for years. Now he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Princess Elindra," he said. "At last. I knew if I waited long enough, you would make a mistake." "Kill me then," she spat. "I am not afraid." "Kill you? No, no. That would be too quick. Your people need to see what happens to those who resist. Tomorrow you will be punished in the Grand Compliance Square, 50 lashes, and then, at dawn the following day, you will be executed." He leaned close to her face. "I want them to watch you break first." They dragged her away in chains. Far across the city, a human freighter captain named Marcus Cole was finishing his cargo delivery. Marcus was 42 years old. He had gray in his beard and scars on his hands, and the tired eyes of a man who had seen too much. 20 years ago, he had been a soldier on Earth. He had fought in wars that seemed important at the time. Then humanity had reached the stars and discovered they were very small fish in a very large ocean. The galaxy was full of older, stronger species. The Dominion of Keth controlled 1,000 worlds. Humanity controlled 12. The smart thing to do was keep your head down, follow the rules, and survive. Marcus was very good at surviving. His ship, the Wandering Star, carried medical supplies and machine parts through Dominion space. It was not exciting work, but it paid well enough. He had a crew of 6 who depended on him. He had learned long ago not to get involved in other people's problems. "Captain?" His first mate, Yara, appeared at his side. She was a tall woman with dark skin and a scar running down her left cheek. "Delivery is complete. We can leave orbit in 3 hours." "Good," Marcus said. "I want to get off this rock. The Keth make me nervous." "Everything makes you nervous. That's why I'm still alive." They walked through the streets of the capital city toward the spaceport. Marcus kept his eyes forward, not looking at the Valanthian workers who shuffled past with empty expressions, not looking at the Keth soldiers who stood on every corner, not looking at the posters that showed Overlord Zethkar's face with slogans about order and obedience. It was not his world, not his problem. Then he saw the crowds gathering. "What's happening?" Yara asked. A Valanthian merchant nearby answered without looking up. "Public punishment tomorrow. They caught someone important. A princess or something." Marcus felt a cold weight in his stomach. "What did she do?" "Rebellion." The merchant shrugged. "They are going to make an example of her. 50 lashes in the square, then execution. The Overlord wants everyone to watch." Yara touched Marcus's arm. "Captain, we should go." "Yeah," he said, "we should." But that night, alone in his cabin on the wandering star, Marcus could not sleep. He kept thinking about the merchant's words. A princess, rebellion, 50 lashes. He had seen Keth punishments before. He had seen what their whips did to flesh. The Valanthians were not as tough as humans. 50 lashes would leave her barely alive if she survived at all. "Not my problem," he told himself. "Not my world. Not my fight." He had a crew to think about, a ship, a life. The smart thing was to leave orbit at first light and never look back. Marcus Cole had always been smart. But when morning came, he did not give the order to leave. Instead, he found himself walking toward the Grand Compliance Square, where thousands of Valanthians were being herded to watch their princess bleed. He told himself he just wanted to see. He told himself it did not mean anything. He was wrong. The Grand Compliance Square had once been called the Plaza of Stars. In the old days, the Valanthian people had gathered here to celebrate festivals and watch meteor showers and dance under the light of 3 moons. Children had played on the smooth stone tiles. Lovers had whispered promises beneath the crystal arches. Now it was a place of fear. Keth soldiers lined every edge of the square. Their black armor absorbed the morning light. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Above them, floating drones recorded everything, broadcasting the scene to every corner of the planet. Marcus stood in the crowd, pressed between Valanthian bodies that trembled with silent grief. He had told himself he would just watch for a moment and then leave. He had told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. But he did not leave. A platform had been built in the center of the square. It was raised high so everyone could see. Metal posts stood at its center, fitted with chains. This was where punishments happened. This was where the Dominion showed its power. The crowd parted as soldiers marched through. Between them walked Princess Elindra. She wore only a thin white shift, torn and dirty from her night in the cells. Her silver skin was bruised. Her long, dark hair hung loose around her face. But she walked with her head high, and her violet eyes showed no fear. Marcus watched her climb the steps to the platform. He watched the soldiers chain her wrists to the metal posts, stretching her arms wide. He watched them tear the back of her shift open, exposing her silver skin to the cold morning air. The crowd was silent, thousands of Valanthians forced to watch their princess suffer. Some wept quietly, others stared at the ground, unable to look. None of them moved to help her. Marcus understood. He had seen this before, on other worlds. When an empire crushes you long enough, you forget that you can fight back. You learn that resistance means death, not just for you, but for everyone you love. You learn to bow your head and survive. Overlord Zethkar walked onto the platform. His gray face was calm, almost bored. He looked out at the crowd with contempt. "This female," he said, his voice amplified across the square, "is Elindra Velsora, the last of the royal bloodline. For 20 years, she has hidden among you like a rat. For 20 years, she has spread lies about resistance and hope. She has convinced some of you to throw away your lives for foolish dreams." He walked behind Elindra and pulled a whip from his belt. It was a Keth discipline lash, designed to cause maximum pain without killing quickly. The tip crackled with energy. "Today, she will learn the price of defiance, and you will learn it with her." The first lash fell. The crack echoed across the square like thunder. A line of silver blood appeared on Elindra's back. She jerked against her chains but did not scream. She did not make a sound. The second lash, the third, the fourth. Marcus watched her face. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were squeezed shut. But still, she did not scream. She would not give them the satisfaction. By the 10th lash, her back was a ruin of torn silver flesh. Blood ran down her legs and pooled on the platform. The crowd was weeping openly now. Some had fallen to their knees. Still she did not scream. Marcus felt something building in his chest. It was not pity, exactly. It was something harder to name. He looked at Elindra's face and saw that she was not looking at Zethkar or at the crowd. She was looking at something far away, something only she could see. And then he understood. She was not just enduring this. She was showing her people something. She was showing them that dignity could not be beaten out of a person. She was showing them that the Dominion could break their bodies, but not their spirits. She was dying to give them that lesson. The 11th lash. The 12th. Something cracked inside Marcus Cole. He had spent 20 years keeping his head down. He had watched injustice on a dozen worlds and told himself it was not his fight. He had learned to survive by not caring. But watching this woman refuse to break, watching her bleed for people who had forgotten how to hope, he found that he could not look away anymore. The 15th lash fell. Marcus did not make a decision. His body simply moved. He shoved through the crowd, pushing Valanthians aside. Soldiers turned toward him, raising weapons, but he was faster than they expected. He reached the platform and vaulted onto it before anyone could stop him. Then he threw himself over Elindra's body. The 16th lash, meant for her back, struck his instead. Pain exploded through him. The Keth whip tore through his shirt and into his flesh. He felt his skin split open. He felt his own blood, red and human, running down his spine. But he did not move. He wrapped his arms around Elindra, shielding her broken body with his own. The square went completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The floating drones continued to record, broadcasting this moment to every corner of the planet and beyond. Zethkar stared at Marcus with an expression of total confusion. This was not supposed to happen. There was no protocol for this. No species intervened in another species' punishment. It was suicide. It made no sense. "What are you doing?" the Overlord demanded. "You are human. This is not your concern." Marcus looked up at him. Blood was running down his back. Pain was clouding his vision, but he met the Overlord's black eyes and did not look away. "You want to finish?" he said. "You go through me." For a long moment, Zethkar did not move. Then his face twisted with rage. He raised the whip again, but before he could strike, a sound rose from the crowd. It started as a whisper and grew into a roar. The Valanthians were shouting, not words, just sound. A cry of something that had been buried for 30 years and was finally breaking free. Hope. Zethkar looked at the crowd and saw something he had never seen before. He saw thousands of silver faces lifted toward the platform. He saw violet eyes bright with tears and fury. He saw a people remembering what they had forgotten. He lowered the whip. "Take them both," he snarled at his soldiers. "Take them to the cells, now!" Soldiers rushed the platform. They pulled Marcus off of Elindra. They unchained her broken body. They dragged them both away as the crowd continued to roar. The punishment was over, but something else had just begun. In the cells beneath the Overlord's palace, Marcus lay on cold stone and listened to his blood drip onto the floor. His back was fire. His head was spinning. In the cell next to his, Elindra lay silent. He had known her for less than a minute. He had destroyed his entire life to save her. His ship would be impounded. His crew would be arrested. Everything he had built for 20 years was gone, and somehow, lying there in the darkness, bleeding and broken, Marcus Cole could not bring himself to regret it. 3 days passed in the darkness of the cells. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness. His wounds had been treated just enough to keep him alive. The Keth wanted him to suffer, not die. Not yet. In the cell next to his, separated by thick metal bars, Elindra lay on her own cold floor. Her injuries were worse than his, but Valanthian's were surprisingly tough. She had survived. On the second day, she finally spoke. "Why?" Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. Marcus turned his head toward the bars. He could see her outline in the dim light, silver skin pale against the darkness. "Why what?" he asked. "Why did you do it? You are human. My world means nothing to you. My people mean nothing to you. You had everything to lose and nothing to gain." Marcus thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing 100 times since they threw him in this cell. "I don't know," he said finally. "I saw you up there. I saw that you weren't going to scream. You were showing them something. You were dying to give them hope." He paused. Someone had to do something. But why you? Why not one of my own people? Maybe because I could. Maybe because I had nothing left to lose anyway, and I just didn't know it yet. He laughed, and it hurt his torn back. Maybe I'm just stupid. Elindra was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "My people will sing songs about you, the human who bled for a stranger." "I'd rather not be in any songs," Marcus said. "Songs usually mean you're dead." Despite everything, Elindra laughed. It was a soft sound, broken by pain, but it was real. They did not know it, but beyond the walls of their prison, the galaxy was changing. The drones in the square had broadcast Marcus's act to every corner of Valanthos. Within hours, copies of the footage had spread to other worlds. Within days, it had reached the edges of Dominion space. Everywhere, people watched the same scene. A human, insignificant and primitive by galactic standards, throwing himself over an alien princess. A human bleeding so that a stranger would not have to suffer alone. A human looking up at the most powerful overlord in the sector and saying, "You go through me." The Dominion had ruled for 1,000 years by convincing everyone that resistance was futile. They had taught 100 species that the smart thing to do was bow your head and survive. They had built an empire on the belief that no one would ever fight back. And now a human had shattered that belief in 60 seconds. On the mining world of Keth Prime, workers whispered about the footage in the tunnels. On the agricultural planet of Virtus, farmers shared it on hidden communication devices. On a dozen occupied worlds, people who had given up hope began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the Dominion could be challenged after all. Overlord Zeth Kar understood the danger. He sat in his command chamber and watched the footage again and again, trying to understand what had happened. His advisors were terrified. "We must execute them both immediately," one said, "before this spreads further. If we execute them now, we make them martyrs," another argued. "The human especially. His species will demand answers. Humanity is weak. They control only 12 worlds. They will do nothing. Are you certain of that? After what we just witnessed? Zethkar raised a hand, silencing them all. Research the humans, he ordered. Everything. Their history, their wars, their behavior. I want to understand what kind of species produces an individual like this. His intelligence officers obeyed. What they found disturbed them. Humans, it turned out, were strange. They fought each other constantly. Their history was filled with wars and conflicts and violence. They should have destroyed themselves long ago, but they hadn't. Somehow, they kept surviving. And mixed in with all that violence was something else. Stories of soldiers throwing themselves on explosives to save their friends. Stories of strangers risking their lives for people they had never met. Stories of humans doing things that made no logical sense, things that went against every instinct of self-preservation. One intelligence officer wrote in his report, "Humans are not rational. They make decisions based on emotion rather than calculation. This makes them unpredictable. Unpredictable is dangerous." Another wrote, "They have a concept they call conscience. It appears to override their survival instincts in certain situations. We have no equivalent. We do not understand it." Zethkar read these reports with growing unease. He had dismissed humanity as irrelevant. Now he was not so sure. Meanwhile, on Valanthos, the resistance was not dead. Yara, Marcus's first mate, had escaped arrest by hiding in the cargo hold of another ship. She had contacts in the underground, people Marcus had helped over the years without asking for anything in return. Now she called in every favor. Within a week, she had found the remnants of Elindra's network. They were broken and frightened, but they were not destroyed. And they were very, very angry. "We have to get them out," Yara told them. "Both of them, the princess and my captain." "The Overlord's prison is a fortress," an old Valanthian said. "No one has ever escaped." "Then we'll be the first." Yara's eyes were hard. "My captain threw himself over your princess without a second thought. Are you telling me her own people won't do the same for her?" The Valanthians looked at each other. Shame and determination mixed on their silver faces. "What do you need?" one of them asked. "Weapons, information, people willing to die." Yara smiled grimly. "And a really good plan." In the cells, Marcus and Elindra continued to talk through the bars. They learned about each other. She told him about her world before the occupation, about the singing towers and the glowing forests. He told her about Earth, about blue oceans and green mountains, and a species that couldn't stop fighting but also couldn't stop hoping. "Your people sound complicated," she said. "We are," he admitted. "We're capable of terrible things, but also good things. Sometimes the same person can do both." "Which are you?" Marcus considered the question. "I used to think I was the kind of person who looked away. Turns out I was wrong." Elindra reached through the bars. Her silver fingers touched his hand. "I am glad you were wrong," she said. On the 5th day, Zethkar made his decision. He could not execute them publicly, not with the whole galaxy watching. But he could not let them live either. They were too dangerous. He would have them killed quietly, in their cells, and announce that they had died of their injuries. By the time anyone investigated, the evidence would be gone. He gave the order. The execution would happen at midnight. But Zethkar had made one mistake. He had underestimated how quickly humans could work when they were motivated, and he had never seen what happened when you gave a human something worth fighting for. The prison beneath the Overlord's palace was considered impossible to breach. It was buried deep underground, protected by layers of reinforced metal and energy shields. 200 Keth soldiers guarded its halls. No one had ever escaped from it. Yara studied the blueprints and smiled. Impossible was just a word humans used to describe things they hadn't tried yet. She had gathered 30 fighters. Half were human, crew members from ships Marcus had helped over the years. The other half were Valanthian, members of the resistance who had found their courage again. They were not an army. They were barely a squad, but they were angry, and they were determined, and they had a plan. The prison's weakness was not its walls or its guards. It was its power supply. Deep beneath the palace, massive generators fed energy to the shields and the security systems. These generators required coolant, which was pumped through pipes from a treatment facility 2 kilometers away. If those pipes were damaged, the generators would overheat. If the generators overheated, they would shut down automatically. And if they shut down, the shields would fall. At exactly 11 o'clock at night, 3 Valanthian engineers planted explosives on the coolant pipes. They had worked in the treatment facility for years, invisible servants that the Keth never noticed. Now they struck their first blow for freedom. The explosion was small but effective. Coolant stopped flowing. Deep beneath the palace, warning lights began to flash. In the security center, Keth officers scrambled to understand what was happening. They sent repair teams to the treatment facility. They tried to reroute power from backup systems. They did not think to reinforce the prison. That was their mistake. Yara led her team through the service tunnels that ran beneath the city. These tunnels had been built by Valanthians long before the occupation, and the Keth had never fully mapped them. In the darkness, humans and Valanthians moved like ghosts. They reached the prison just as the emergency generators began to fail. The shields flickered, the lights dimmed, and Yara's team struck. The fighting was brutal. Keth soldiers were strong and well-trained. But Yara's fighters had something the Keth did not understand. They were fighting for people they loved. A young Valanthian named Kess died in the first corridor, shot down as he cleared the way for others. A human engineer named Torres fell in the second, buying time for the team to advance. Each death was a wound that the survivors carried with them. Fuel for their fury. Yara herself killed 4 Keth soldiers on the way to the cells. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were cold. Marcus had saved her life 3 times over the years they had served together. She would burn this entire palace to the ground to return the favor. They reached the detention level with 12 fighters remaining. The door was sealed, but a Valanthian technician had the codes. It had taken the resistance years to plant people in the right positions. Tonight, all those years paid off. The door opened. Marcus heard the fighting before he saw it. Plasma fire and shouting, and the sound of bodies falling. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain in his back, and pressed against the bars of his cell. Then Yara appeared in the corridor, her face streaked with blood and smoke. "Captain," she said, and her voice cracked. "You look terrible." "You're late," Marcus replied. "Traffic was bad." She blasted the lock off his cell, then moved to Elindra's. The princess could barely stand, but her eyes were bright with fierce determination. "We need to move," Yara said. "Reinforcements are coming. We have maybe 10 minutes." They ran. The tunnels were chaos. Keth soldiers had realized what was happening and were flooding into the underground passages. Yara's fighters formed a rearguard, holding them off while the others escaped. More fell. A human woman named Chen. A Valanthian elder named Torvis the Younger, named for his father who had died in the temple raid. Each one gave their life so that the others could keep running. They emerged from the tunnels at the edge of the city, where a stolen transport waited. It was not much. Just a cargo shuttle with barely enough power to reach orbit. But it was enough. As the shuttle lifted off, Marcus looked down at the city below. He could see fires burning. He could see Keth ships scrambling to pursue. He could see the palace where Zeth-Kar was undoubtedly screaming in rage. "We did it," Yara said, slumping into a seat. "I can't believe we actually did it." "We're not safe yet," Marcus replied. "They'll hunt us across the sector. Then we'd better make sure it was worth it." Beside him, Elindra was staring at a communication console. Her fingers moved across the controls. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. "Something I should have done a long time ago." She activated a broadcast signal. It would reach every receiver on the planet, every ship in orbit, every relay station in the sector. When she spoke, her voice was strong despite her injuries. "People of Valanthos, this is Elindra Velsora. I am alive, I am free, and I am not alone." She paused, looking at Marcus. "A stranger came to our world, a human with no reason to care about our suffering. When I was beaten, he threw his body over mine. When I bled, he bled with me. He did not know me. He gained nothing. He risked everything." Her voice grew stronger. "For 30 years we have forgotten who we are. We have bowed our heads and accepted our chains because we believed we had no choice. But we do have a choice. We have always had a choice. The Dominion's power is not in their weapons or their ships. It is in our fear, and fear can be broken." She looked out at the stars. "I am not asking you to rise up today. I am not asking you to die. I am asking you to remember. Remember what we were. Remember what we can be again. Remember that if a human can find the courage to stand against the Dominion, so can we." She ended the broadcast. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Yara laughed. "Well," she said, "we're definitely wanted criminals now." Marcus looked at Elindra. "You just declared war on an empire." "No," she replied. "I just reminded my people that they are not slaves. The war comes later." "And what about us?" She met his eyes. "You saved my life. You bled for me when no one else would. Where I go, you are welcome. Always." Marcus thought about his ship, impounded somewhere below. He thought about his old life, quiet and safe and small. He thought about 20 years of keeping his head down. Then he thought about the look in Elindra's eyes when she refused to scream. "I guess I'm not a freighter captain anymore," he said. "No," Elindra agreed. "Now you are something more." The shuttle flew on through the darkness, carrying 2 wounded souls toward an uncertain future. Behind them, on 100 worlds, people were watching the broadcast. They were whispering to each other. They were starting to remember what hope felt like. The spark had become a fire, and fires, once started, are very hard to put out. 6 months changed everything. What had started as whispers became shouts. What had started as scattered acts of defiance became a movement. Across Dominion space, occupied peoples were waking up. They were remembering that chains could be broken. Elindra had built a coalition from nothing. Valanthians, humans, and half a dozen other species who had suffered under Keth rule. They called themselves the Alliance of Free Worlds, though they controlled no worlds yet. They operated from hidden bases on moons and asteroids, always moving, always fighting. Marcus had become something he never expected. Not a leader exactly, but a symbol. The human who threw himself over the princess, the man who bled for a stranger. Whenever spirits flagged, whenever hope seemed lost, someone would tell the story again. He hated it. He had never wanted to be a symbol. But he had learned that sometimes history chose you, whether you wanted it or not. Now they faced their greatest test. Zeth-Kar had been given an ultimatum by the Dominion High Council: crush the rebellion or be replaced. The Overlord had chosen the most brutal option available: orbital bombardment of the resistance strongholds on Valanthos. Millions of civilians would die. The planet would be left a smoking ruin, a warning to anyone else who dared to resist. The bombardment was scheduled for dawn. In the command center of their hidden base, Elindra stood before a holographic map of the Valanthos system. Around her gathered the leaders of the Alliance: Valanthians, humans, others who had joined the cause. Their faces were grim. "The Dominion fleet has taken position over Valanthos," she said. 12 warships. The command vessel is the Eternal Silence, Zeth-Kar's flagship. When the bombardment begins, there will be no stopping it. We can't match 12 warships, a Valanthian commander said. We have, 30 ships? Most of them converted freighters? 32, Yara corrected. And they're very well-armed freighters. It's not enough. We'd be throwing our lives away. Maybe, Marcus said. Everyone turned to look at him. But what's the alternative? Let millions die? Let Zethkar prove that resistance is futile? He stepped forward to the map. We can't win a straight fight against 12 warships, but we don't have to. We just have to stop the bombardment. And for that, we only need to take out one ship. He pointed to the command vessel. The Eternal Silence controls the bombardment protocols. If we disable or destroy it, the other ships can't fire without new orders from Dominion High Command. That buys Valanthos time. Maybe days, maybe weeks. Enough time to evacuate civilians. Enough time for the rest of the galaxy to see what the Dominion is willing to do. You're talking about a direct assault on the most heavily armed ship in the sector, the Valanthian commander said. That's not a battle. That's suicide. Maybe, Marcus said again, but it's a chance, and I'd rather die taking a chance than live knowing I did nothing. The room was silent. Then Alindra spoke. I will go. Marcus turned to her. No, you're too important. The Alliance needs you. The Alliance needs hope, she replied. And hope requires action, not just words. You threw yourself over me 6 months ago. Did you think I would do less? She looked at the others. I am not asking anyone to follow us. This is a choice each person must make for themselves. But I am going, and I will not go alone. One by one, hands rose around the room. Valanthians, humans, others. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to crew a desperate mission. Enough to strike one blow for freedom. The battle began at midnight. The Alliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of Valanthos, using the planet itself as cover. Immediately, the Dominion ships moved to intercept. Plasma fire lit up the darkness. Ships exploded on both sides. Marcus flew the lead ship, a converted cargo vessel called the Last Chance. Alindra stood beside him on the bridge. Behind them flew 15 other ships, all that remained of the assault force. The Dominion fleet was terrifying. Massive warships with weapons that could crack planets. Against them, the Alliance had courage and desperation and not much else. But they also had something the Keth did not understand. Humans had a gift for doing impossible things when the odds were against them. They had climbed mountains that should have killed them. They had crossed oceans in boats made of wood. They had walked on their own moon when their technology was barely capable of reaching it. They had a word for this. Audacity. Marcus flew the Last Chance through a barrage of fire that should have vaporized them. He weaved between warships, using their own bulk as cover. He pushed the engines past their limits, past the point where the computer screamed warnings about structural failure. "We're not going to make it," someone shouted. "We are," Marcus replied. His hands were steady on the controls. His eyes never left the command ship ahead. The Eternal Silence loomed before them, enormous and deadly. Its weapons were turning toward the Last Chance. In seconds, they would be destroyed. Then Yara's ship, the Wandering Star, threw itself into the path of the flagship's main cannon. The blast that would have destroyed Marcus instead hit Yara's vessel. The Wandering Star exploded in a ball of fire. Yara and her crew died instantly. Marcus felt something tear inside him, but he did not stop. He could not stop. Yara had given him this chance. He would not waste it. The Last Chance plunged into the Eternal Silence's hangar bay, crashing through the energy shields at a speed that should have been impossible. The ship screamed as it tore through metal and machinery. When it finally stopped, half the crew was dead. But Marcus was alive, and so was Alindra. They fought their way through the corridors of the flagship, a handful of survivors against hundreds of Keth soldiers. They should have been overwhelmed. But humans fought like nothing the Keth had ever seen, wild and unpredictable and refusing to die. They reached the bridge. Zeth-Kar stood at the center of the command room, surrounded by his officers. His black eyes widened when he saw Marcus, bloodied and battered, stepping through the door. "You," the Overlord said. "You should be dead." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But here I am." Zeth-Kar drew a weapon. "You think you've won? Even if you kill me, the Dominion will send another fleet, and another. You cannot defeat an empire." "Maybe not," Marcus said. "But we can show the galaxy that empires can bleed. We can show them that one person, one choice, can change everything." He raised his own weapon. "You asked me once why I threw myself over her. I didn't have an answer then. I do now." He looked at Elindra, standing beside him, her violet eyes fierce with determination. "Because some things are worth dying for, and you will never understand that. That's why you've already lost." The fight was brief and brutal. Zeth-Kar was a skilled warrior, but he fought to survive. Marcus fought for something greater. When it was over, the Overlord lay dead on his own bridge. Elindra took control of the ship's communications. She broadcast one message to the Dominion fleet. "The bombardment is canceled. Your Overlord is dead. You can fight and die for nothing, or you can withdraw." For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the Dominion warships turned and retreated into hyperspace. Valanthos was saved. The cost had been terrible. Half the Alliance fleet was destroyed. Yara was gone. So many others who had believed in the dream of freedom. But the dream survived. In the weeks that followed, more worlds joined the Alliance. The footage of the battle, of the desperate assault on the flagship, spread across the galaxy. People saw that the Dominion could be defeated. They saw that courage could triumph over fear. On Valanthos, Elindra was crowned queen, not because of her bloodline, but because her people chose her. She stood before a crowd of millions, and beside her stood Marcus Cole, the human who had started it all. "I never wanted to be a hero," he told her quietly before the ceremony. "Neither did I," she replied, "but the galaxy needed us to be. And we answered." She took his hand. "The war is not over. The Dominion will return. There will be more battles, more sacrifices, more loss." "I know," Marcus said. "Will you stay?" He looked out at the crowd. Valanthians and humans standing together. Silver faces and pale ones, united by something stronger than species or history. "Yeah," he said. "I'll stay." Across the galaxy, other humans heard the story. Freighter captains and colonists, soldiers and wanderers. They heard about the man who threw himself over an alien princess. They heard about the battle against impossible odds. They heard about a species that refused to accept that some things couldn't be done, and they began to ask themselves, if Marcus Cole could do that, what could we do together? The Dominion had ruled for 1,000 years. They had believed their power was absolute. They were wrong. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy, not with a fleet or an army, but with a single act of compassion, repeated and multiplied until it became a revolution. The universe would never be the same.